Well, welcome to Daily Word, a teaching ministry of Redeemer Bible Church in Gilbert, Arizona. My name is Tim, and I'm one of the pastors here. Well, today we are continuing on the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9, verses 1 through 17. So chapter 9 is essentially a continuation of the miracles of chapter 8, with a few other things thrown in there. So let's get into it. Verse 1. And getting into a boat, he crossed over and came to his own city. And behold, some people brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, Take heart, my son, your sins are forgiven. And behold, some of the scribes said to themselves, This man is blaspheming. But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Why do you think evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, Your sins are forgiven, or to say, Rise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. Then he said to the paralytic, Rise, pick up your bed and go home. And he rose and went home. When the crowd saw it, they were afraid, and they glorified God who had given such authority to men. Well, Mark 2 and Luke 5 describe this scene in greater detail. The man was lowered through the roof of the house. We know that from Sunday school. A very dramatic scene that Matthew simplifies. But Jesus' miracles are not performed for crowd effect. Instead, they are done to minister the humble needs of humble people. This stands in stark contrast to what we might see in today's world by so-called faith healers. Many commentators noted the presence of so much sickness among Israel was evidence of their unfaithfulness to God and their generally low spiritual condition. Fast forward to the world today, and one can ponder, why are we being beset by a worldwide pandemic? Food for thought. One takeaway from the story is that the love of the paralyzed man's friends, they stopped at nothing to get their friend help. Such a great example for us to care for the other, to humble ourselves for people that can do nothing for you, to place yourself in a position to simply love and care, no fanfare, just an honest and pure reaction to a situation. Jesus sees past physical affliction and addresses his heart because that was the bigger issue. We can hide all we want, but Jesus goes right for the sin in our lives, reveals it, and heals it. One commentator explained it this way. The reasons why Jesus dealt with a man's sin first. Because sin is the root from which all our evils come. To show that forgiveness is more important than bodily healing. To show that the most important thing Jesus came to do was to deal with sin. To show that when a man's sins are forgiven, he becomes the Son of God. To show that the response to faith is forgiveness of sin. Let's go to verse 9. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at a tax booth, and he said to him, Follow me. And he rose and followed him. Matthew slips in this story of how he came to follow the Lord. It's subtle and seemingly out of place, but the significance of a tax collector following Jesus was a watershed moment. Taxmen in that day, and probably today as well, were considered traitors and sinners of the highest order. They had sold their souls to the Roman Empire. So him leaving and only taking his pen, no questions asked, is a remarkable event, and perhaps why Matthew slipped it into the passage with no fanfare but having meaning. So verse 10 says that as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? When he heard it, he said, Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. I've asked myself many times the question, how many non-Christians do I know? There's no standard, but personally I need to break out of what I would call my Christian bubble more than I do. We can be very comfortable with our own type, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But consider praying for God to widen your worldview, get out of your comfort zone, and stretch yourself. Romans 5:8 reminds us that God shows his love for us and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So be around sinners. That's everybody, but make a concerted effort. And finally, verse 14, Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst and the wine is spilled and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, so both are preserved. Well, with this illustration of the wineskins, Jesus explained that he did not come to repair or reform the old institutions of Judaism, but to institute a new covenant altogether. The new covenant doesn't just improve the old, it replaces it and goes beyond it. Jesus came to introduce something new, not to patch up something old. This is what salvation is all about. In doing this, Jesus does not destroy the old, the law, but he fulfills it. Well, we get a glimpse of what is to come in verse 15. His time was short, thus fasting in that moment was not necessary. It was breaking away from the law and the public show of fasting, as we had learned earlier. On a personal level, we can be guilty of continuing to pour new wine into old wineskins, perhaps a relationship that needs a change that we are resistant to. Many of us have stayed in jobs, churches, and neighborhoods beyond their benefit, but are fearful of moving away from the comfortable. Change can be hard for many of us, but there are times that call for refreshment and a new attitude, a new place. My encouragement is to step out in faith, look for places in your life where you're becoming stagnant and less productive, and ask the Lord to reveal those areas to you. So the word for this section to me is action. Ponder that. Where are you taking action? Where are you inactive? Where are you stalling? Where are you stagnating? How do I change? How do I embrace the new? So we'll see you tomorrow as we finish chapter 9.